Blight by Orpheus Kidwell, Chapter 1, Part 2. It was several hours later before Naruto and his group stopped their trek through the Blight. They had headed east towards the Kingdom of Vale rather than moving towards Vacuo. The quintet knew exactly where the rendezvous point was they needed to reach to meet with the others. Several dozen miles northeast from the complex, there was a forest infested with Grim. That's where they currently found themselves. Fu, do you have any idea where they are? Naruto asked the verdette from his seat on a particularly large rock. The blonde looked exceptionally bored, given they had been waiting for nearly half an hour. At this point, it was so infuriating to have nothing to do. It just made him want to. No, he shouldn't do that. If he tried to find something to take his anger out on, there's a good chance it could give these people a clue on their location. Fu finally spoke up after some time. It seems that some of the insects sensed the things that felt like Grim, but also like humans, and also like they belonged in the forest. It sounds like at least one of us passed through here and kept going. I'm honestly not sure who it could be, but it can't be a good idea to leave them be. If it was B or Yujito, it would be fine, but I'm afraid of what would happen if it were Yagura. You know how he gets. Don't even talk about things like that, Fu. Emerald begged with a sigh. We don't need that idiot to go on a rampage this early. Fu shrugged, which only led Emerald to shake her head. Neither Yagura nor Fu made their distaste for the world in general a secret. I know how you feel about humanity, but we still shouldn't let him do what he wants. Utakata nodded. Emerald is correct. It would be bad if he did so. There's a good chance the ones in charge of the complex might be able to track us down if he made a scene. Naruto took this opportunity to jump from the rock and landed near his family. Alright, it's decided then. We can't actually be sure then any of the others know how a rendezvous point works. With that in mind, I think we should go after whoever it was that passed through. If it's Jagura, we need to keep him from killing too many people. If it's Yujiro B, Roshi, or Han, I think we'll be fine though. Let's hope it's Yagura though. So we can keep him from going on a rampage? Gara asked. No, because Yujiro and B are too crazy, Emerald responded with a shudder. I love your siblings, Garam. I love them like my own, but I can only stand so much insanity. The boy shrugged before pausing as a thought occurred to him. What would Tamari and Konkuro be? He wondered as he looked around. The youngest and first of the whites widened his eyes as he pondered it. Did they make it out? Did someone kill them? He began whispering to himself so lowly that no one could actually make out what he said, even with enhanced hearing. Don't worry too much about them, Naruto told the redhead as he placed a hand on his shoulder. Gar looked up at the blonde. Madness only Baird kept at bay in his eyes. They were supposed to be with Han, and you know that he would sooner sacrifice himself than allow someone close to him to die. He also knows how much they mean to you, so I am positive that we'll find all three of them together. Gara thought about what the blonde said and nodded, adopting a cold look in his eyes once more. You're right, Naruto. I apologize for my overreaction. The ninth white chuckled and ruffled Gara's hair, much to the younger boy's chagrin. Don't even mention it, Gara. All right, lead the way, Fu. The winged weight nodded and began walking as the forest became abuzz with the activity of nameless and countless insects. As part of the experimentation, each white was able to communicate with animals that were somewhat closely related to their faunus DNA. Fu went a step ahead thanks to the infusion of Empress Sting Nether infused into her, allowing her to forcefully take control of any and all insects in an area. They were powerless to do anything but follow her orders thanks to her sixth tail. It seems that whoever passed through isn't that far off, Fu mentioned. They weren't running and didn't even leave the forest. I just hate that we can't sense each other, but everyone else can sense us, the girl grumbled as they walked. It's just an effect of your powers, Emerald pointed out. I can't sense Grim, but I can sense anything with an aura if I pulse mine out. I imagine that Grim can sense each other as well through some function. If you were to send out your... I'm not sure what your energy is actually called. You have both aura and nether. We'll figure that out later, but if you were to pulse it out, you just cause nether to deteriorate from your aura and aura to flare up to protect humans and faunas from your nether. While you could detect things with only one, given each white has both energy sources, it seems that their nether cancels out your aura and their aura cancels out your nether. That doesn't mean we have to like it, though, Naruto pointed out in agreement with Fu. It really does make finding each other difficult since we require the assistance of someone else to do the actual tracking for us. Emerald shrugged. Damn, a scientist screwing everything up. Couldn't they do anything right? I mean, if it weren't for the complex, then none of us would know each other. They helped us form our family at the very least, Utakata pointed out. When Naruto heard that, he sighed and nodded. I do like that I have a family now instead of staying in that orphanage, but it doesn't mean I wouldn't give it all up in an instant. If it were possible to keep all of you from having to go through that, I would go back right now. Naruto, you must remain calm. Agara ordered. I can feel all of the hatred and anger coming off of you, and it would not do to have Grim show up. On top of that, such emotions can do nothing but bring us misfortune. We must remain collected if we are to become reunited. The ninth white sighed and gripped the magatama on his necklace tightly with a nod. Of course, you're absolutely correct, Garam. I'm sorry, I almost lost it there for a moment. Alright, Fu. If they haven't left the forest yet, do you know how much farther it is until we get there? Maybe if you look up, kitten. The voice gained everyone's attention. As one looked at the tree branches to find another blonde, she jumped down and landed on her feet, a grin on her lips. It was fitting, given the blonde had a pair of cattails that swayed behind her. Her hair itself was tied in a stiff ponytail, bandages keeping it in place tightly. Around her neck was a necklace with two makatama made of grim mask shards, and she looked at them with amused blue eyes. As for clothing, this woman was wearing a red shirt and black pants. Over the shirt was a black coat lined with white fur that looked oddly familiar. When Utakata noticed the blood on the jacket, he sighed. You took that from a corpse, didn't you? Yujito grinned wider. Well, at least Hidan is one less person we have to worry about. Have you seen anyone else, Yuji? He wondered. When the woman shook her head, he looked at Naruto. What do you think? The nine-tailed teen thought a moment. Well, there's six of us now. If we assume that Han is with Tamara and Kankuro, then those three are more than capable of surviving anything lower than a Drake-type Grim. Roshi won't allow anything to find him unless he wants to be found. B is eccentric, but still the second strongest of us, so there's no reason to worry over him. I'm just worried that the Yakura will get in trouble. There's no telling where he is, though, unless you sense him, Em. Emerald shook her head to signal that she had, in fact, not. If they decided to ignore the rendezvous I very specifically set up, then I suppose we should just continue. There's got to be a settlement somewhere around here. It's as good a plan as any, Utakata agreed, and the now sextet made their way out of the forest. The more distance they put in between themselves and the complex, the better. 3 days later, it turns out that in fact there didn't have to be a settlement anywhere near the complex. Perhaps that was for the best. After 3 days, 3 nights, and hundreds of miles, the group had finally come across something. It wasn't large, perhaps 14 families at most, but Grove was still something. The village itself numbered about 20 buildings with palace surroundings it that would never stand up to even a single barbatusk. The illusion of safety was nice for for the naive, though. Before the gate stood two men carrying rifles that addressed the group. "What's your business, travelers?" One of them wondered. "We're just looking for a place to sleep," Utukata mentioned before anyone else could talk. It was best if he took care of this. "Is there an inn in the village?" The second guard nodded at the affirmative. The largest reason that they weren't reacting to the five whites was down to a particular ability they shared. They were capable of condensing their power down. It made their aura nether seem less voluminous, though far denser, and also caused their tails to disappear. The more they did it, Gar found hiding his nether to be the easiest of them, given he had the least amount of nether to condense. Naruto, on their hand, had required several months in order to get this technique down. Of course, the first guard seemed to note the gear and dress of the six and smiled. "We always have room for huntsmen. Please, I hope you will enjoy your time in Grove." Udakata bowed his head slightly in appreciation. "Thank you. Let us be off then." He motioned the others to follow him, and they made their way through the palace and down the road. "I wonder if those guards are so incompetent as to not detect the absence of soul right before them," Utakata commented. "It's not that simple," Emerald noted, gaining the sixth white's attention. "Yeah, the whites have a lot of aura and nether, but the problem is that it's difficult to distinguish between the two of them. On top of that, when you're condensing it, the two become almost indistinguishable, and the amount of aura you have is so dramatically larger than your nether that it does a good job of hiding the nether." "Well, that's because those scientists at least knew how to make an effective weapon. With all the people they killed and drugger they created, I would hope successes were made well," Naruto replied. "Still, I do hope nothing happens to make us reveal ourselves so quickly. I feel so weak and exposed right now. Losing access to my tailed powers really sucks." Emerald didn't really get it, but the other whites seemed to share the same opinion. She supposed it might be similar to losing her semblance while in unknown territory, but she couldn't be entirely sure. Not much longer, the group found that they had been searching for the inn. The sleeping dragon was 2 stories high and made of wood. Large glass windows were blocked off by purple drapes, and the exterior seemed to have been maintained well. There was no obvious paint chips. The foundation seemed secure enough, and they couldn't see any reason why to distrust it. Walking inside, they were unsurprised to find it just as well maintained. The walls were painted a soft blue that went well with the lighting. The waxed floors showcased the care for cleanliness, while there were already someone greeting them the moment they walked in. This was a good choice to make, Utakata felt. As the oldest among them left to set up their rooms, he left the others behind. After he was sure Utakata was keeping the innkeeper busy, Naruto turned to the others. "Can you feel that? I'm not going crazy, am I?" The other whites nodded, though Emerald seemed confused. "Alright, I'm lost. What's going on?" I should looked at them, hoping someone would explain. "It feels like, how do I put this? the opposite of a grim. Fu tried to describe it. It's as if it's an aura so powerful it could blot out my nether. But it's also not aura, Gara continued. It's not nether either. It feels different from me. If I'm both combined, it feels like this energy is neither, Naruto commented with a thoughtful look. But it's suffocating, Yujito added. The grim part of me is just screaming at me to run away, and I don't know what I should do. When Emerald looked at the second white, she could actually see the barely restrained terror in her eyes. What is it that they were feeling? It wasn't a grim. She would be able to feel it if it was. All four of them suddenly turned their heads as one to regard someone coming from upstairs. The woman was tan with chestnut brown hair and a pair of matching eyes. She wore a cream blouse with a brown vest over it, yellow pauldrons covering her shoulders, as well as a pair of brown pants and knee-high yellow boots. It wasn't her outfit that they were paying attention to, though. Her. It's her, Naruto muttered, though Emerald could barely hear it. Oh, are you leaving already, Miss Amber? The clerk asked, getting a nod from the woman. I really must be on my way. Thank you for everything. The clerk smiled. Amber paused, looking at the whites, but said nothing, walking past them. Utakata excused himself from the clerk and came over to them. Did you? The others nodded once. He looked back at the clerk, then at his family, and sighed. Naruto, I know what's going through your head. If we don't find out what she is and Yagura ends up meeting her, he muttered. You're worried too much about that cycle, you know. The sixth white replied but sighed. Alright, if she's leaving the village, it seems we'll have to continue as well. Are you alright to travel, Emerald? The verdette nodded her head. Don't worry about that, I'm fine. With that, the whites left. While the clerk was confused, she didn't say anything. Outside, the whites were presented with the woman standing there and waiting for them. I figured that you would come out. I do hope we won't have to fight in the middle of a village. As she asked that, her eyes seemed to glow a dull orange, but it was gone as quickly as it came. We have no wish to fight you, Utakata mentioned before looking down at Naruto, who was whistling innocently. Most of us, anyways. We were simply curious what in the name of dust you are. Utakata allowed a portion of his own power to a pulse, showing the woman that he was unafraid. I could ask you five the same thing. Amber commented and looked around, seeing that some of the villagers were becoming uncomfortable, but didn't know why. It was likely even they could feel the onslaught of power, but didn't know what it was or where it came from. Let us leave Grove and we shall speak. Do not try anything, though. While you may outnumber me, I outclass you by many magnitude. The underlying threat was more than obvious enough. Eastern Road. The group walked out the eastern gate of Grove in silence. Only when they were several minutes out did either party begin. It was neither Utakata nor Ember, however. Are you human? Fu asked, while Amber was prepared for many things that was not one of them. Thinking a moment over what it was the girl asked her, she shook her head. Then what are you? You don't feel like you have aura or nether. It feels like the opposite of nether, but in a different way than aura is. It's more like dust than anything. Amber chuckled at that. I never quite thought about my own abilities like that. I suppose that's not an incorrect way to describe it. However, before I explain where my powers come from, I'm more curious about exactly what you are. You feel like a human, but also like a faunus, and also like several types of grim. It is disconcerting. Fu seemed put off at the statement, so Naruto stepped forward to explain it. It wasn't the part where Amber called it disconcerting that bothered Fu. He knew it was the fact that someone insinuated she was human. We are whites. If they were to gain the trust of this woman, they needed to show faith. Explaining their own story might give them just enough to find out whether she was a danger to their siblings. We are everything you described, but also none of them. I'm not sure exactly who is responsible for it, but we were kidnapped around 8 years ago. As humans, we have particularly strong auras. The organization responsible for our creation wanted humans and faunas with dense auras for what they planned. After thousands of experiments, there were few successes, as they termed us. Our genetics were altered to include both human and faunus genetics until we became a hybridization, so far away from the two that we aren't one or the other. That was a necessary step up because if someone has too weak of a soul when the fusion starts, they become a drugger. Amber didn't even need to ask the question she was wondering about as Naruto continued. The infusion is a process created by Dr. Yamato Orochimaru and Dr. Kabuto Yakushi, wherein they take the dust form of slain Grim and condense it into a liquid essence to inject it into a subject. If the subject has too weak of a soul, as I stated, they become a Draugr. These are mindless beasts that appear like a human or faunus, but with charcoal black skin, red eyes, and large red veins coating their body. After the first year of a Draugr's existence, they also begin to grow bone-like protrusions over their body in a similar fashion to whichever species of Grim they've been infused with. On top of that, they still retain their aura and semblance. In terms of strength, they can be anything from a newborn Nevermore to a Titan class Drake type Grim. It all depends on their strength prior to the infusion, their semblance, and the species they were infused with. Amber's eyes widened at the information. Those were the failures? Us whites are different. We appear as human when we condense our aura and nether, but can release them to go into our full power in a moment's notice. With that said, Naruto felt they were far enough from growth to do so and stopped. Condensing his energies, the air rippled around him, and instantaneously he now had his nine tails once more. While Amber had been looking forward one moment, she immediately turned around upon feeling the immense amount of nether he gave off. The feeling of the nether was, well, if those were the species she thought, then Osbin would really like to know about this. Naruto grinned at the reaction before condensing his energy once more. After a few seconds, he was back to appearing like a normal hearing. Impressive, isn't it? You said you were experiments from an organization you didn't know the name of. Did you escape then? At the boy's white grin, she took that as a yes. What happened to the members of the organization? Well, I know that we killed some of them. So did Utakata. I imagine Yuji did more than her fair share, didn't you? The other blonde smiled mischievously. Only the ones who hated cats, I promise. I'm not sure about the rest, though. It was mostly Yakura and Roche's job to clear out the base. They hated the scientists even more than we did, so we let them do what they wanted. So, Amber, that just leaves one question. You aren't a white, a Draugr, a human, a faunus, or a Grim. What are you? Amber paused a moment before deciding to answer. Let me ask you something. How much do you know about fairy tales?